All right. So, Alan Weiss, welcome to Ordinary Visionaries. I'm really thrilled to be doing an interview with you.
Thank you, Robert. It's always good to see you. We've known each other for 1,000 years.
Yeah, a long time. Well, I read your book. Um, I'm blanking on the name of your book. It's right there on my thing. Million Dollar Consulting, more than 25 years ago, and it really shaped my whole ideas about marketing and pricing my business. And you've been a marketing guru and business consultant to gazillions of people, technical term. And I've done a few interviews with you in the past, but this one will be different because who knows what we'll talk about. So, in the dictionary, maybe the dictionary of professional people, beside the word ordinary visionaries, your picture is there. You're the guy. An ordinary visionary is someone who has a vision and then takes action to make a difference. And that's what you've done your whole career. And so, to many people's benefit. So, tell me, Alan Weiss, how are you an ordinary visionary?
Well, I've never looked at it that way as that phrase, but what you say makes sense for a lot of people. I think the fact is that I have tried to find, first, inadvertently, and second, advertently, something I love that makes a difference and that will support me and my family in a style to which we would like to live. And I believe that passion is everything. And that if you're engaged with something that you're passionate about, I call it a calling, as do many people, and that can constitute your life. I think that's just wonderful. I have to say to you, Robert, I've never thought of myself as ordinary in anything, except where I have no talent, like playing the piano or singing.
Right,
But
right.
I do believe that all people have talents, and that the key is to try to maximize your talents so that you're not walking 10 miles, you're riding 10 miles.
Great. So you mentioned passion. Tell me a bit about passion. And, what does passion mean in your life and how does it manifest?
Well, it means passion. Passion means that what you do is never onerous. You're happy to do it. You're engaged. It gives you pleasure and gratification. All motivation is intrinsic. And so the more you have passion, the more you're able to motivate yourself. You can't depend on other people to motivate you. It doesn't work that way. If you give an unhappy employee more money, you have a wealthy or unhappy employee, not motivated.
Right, right.
So there's this old trope in the speaking business. I've been a professional speaker forever. And it goes like this. You come across somebody who's laying bricks, a stonemason, and you say, "What are you doing?" Stonemason says, "I'm laying bricks." You come across a second one. "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral." Now, the moral at this point is supposed to be that if a person sees a larger end, they're more dedicated to their work. But I've changed this. I think there's a third stonemason. And when you ask that stonemason what he's doing, he says, "I'm bringing people closer to God." That's a calling. So laying those stones is not onerous. It's part of this grand scheme where you're bringing people closer to God. And I think too many people get up in the morning and see it as a long, slow crawl through enemy territory. And that's because they're working. And that means they're not passionate about what they do. And my advice to everyone is, if you're out on your, a lot of people who were in large companies went out on their own, as a lot of your clients and my clients have done. But the trouble is when they go out on their own, they have a worse boss. And so the idea is to enjoy yourself.
I always said that I have myself and my boss, and they're the same person, and somehow we've worked it out. Alan, tell our listeners a bit about your life. Not your whole story from beginning to end. That would be a 5-hour interview. But what is your life like?
Today?
Well, in general.
Well, I believe wealth is discretionary time, not money. And I have huge discretionary time. We were talking before we went on. I just came back from Vegas, saw my West Coast family, did some business, had good meals, so was Cheryl. Even won at roulette, which is rare.
Wow.
And my wife and I will be going to New York this weekend, and we'll see 2 plays, and we'll get some good meals, and then we'll get on the train, come back up here to Rhode Island. So to me, freedom is everything. And my life is full of freedom, and I lead a good life. But this is not my daddy's money. My parents were poor. I'm poorer than most people who say to you, well, look at you, you're privileged. I'm not privileged. I grew up poorer than they did, listening to my parents argue about a $45 rent bill they couldn't pay. So I'm a self-made person. I'm probably one of the last vestiges of the American dream. I'm a senior baby boomer. And I've taken care of my family. I took care of my parents. My kids didn't have any college debt. And I'm proud to have done that. And at the same time, I've been very philanthropic. And so I believe, Robert, that you have no more right to consume wealth and happiness if you don't produce wealth and happiness. That, I think, is a reciprocity that makes sense, and that's what I try to do.
So the contrast here is, rich people that didn't earn it. And I suppose there are a lot of people like that. Or you see, I suppose an executive that's making multi-million dollars earned it in some way. He got promoted to that position. But he has a lot of people to answer to, very different than you and I. So, what is it about being self-employed, which you've been for a very long time? You've never had many employees. You've had a few assistants, right?
Yeah, zero.
Yeah, me too. And I say, if you're doing it well and you're making a good living at it, it's the best lifestyle on planet Earth. I mean, There's nothing like it.
And only in America. I mean, I've been to 63, 64 countries. And,
really?
Some of them are great places. I've done business in most of them. And, we were in Rome earlier this year. We'll be in Argentina early next year. But I'm convinced that only in America could people succeed like you and I have. Because of the freedoms here, because of the opportunity here, because you can be fearless here and so forth. And too many people, I think one of the great problems of our age is that people just don't trust their own judgment. I think self-esteem is lower than it's ever been, and they just don't trust themselves.
Yeah.
So, I've always trusted myself. I've made errors, but I'm resilient. I bounce forward. Yeah. And I'm not afraid of making errors. My father was a paratrooper. He jumped into the jungles of New Guinea with people shooting at him.
In World War II?
In World War II, yeah. He was in the first parachute regiment ever formed, all voluntary. He told me he thought it'd be a good idea at the time. And my father died at 100, 99 years and 11 months. He died in his bed at 100.
Wow.
And he went through that. Nobody's shooting at you and me. I've never gone into a buyer's office and come out poorer. No, he never took my money. I didn't get the business, but I learned something. And so you can't go through life like it's a slow crawl through enemy territory. You have to go through life like you own
it. You've done a lot of things right. But what are some of the mistakes you've made in this process? People are always saying, what do I do right? How I do this? What's the best strategy? And you have great answers for those.
Well, tactically and very specifically.
Yeah.
Especially given the fact that, most of your audience is self-employed. I should have collected names from the outset. Now, there were no computers then. There were no iPhones. But still, I could write in a book. And I didn't collect enough names. And contacts are the key. Referrals are the key. References are the key. I should have done that better. On a more strategic sense, it was a very short error. On my very first piece of business, when I went independent, it was with Merck, who I wound up working with for 12 years. And I charged $14,000 for the project. And the buyer pushed it back at me and said, yeah, that's fine. Let's go. So I said, oh, my God, it should have been $35,000. Well, over the next 12 years, I probably made $2 or $3 million at Merck and from referrals from Merck. Wow. So I learned early, the value-based fees and that kind of thing. And I also learned early that, I was traveling 80% of the time when I got fired and I was trying to build my own business. There was no remote work. And then I got it down to 65% by streamlining what I did and managing the client's perceptions. In other words, I was the consultant. The client didn't tell me how to consult. I put my foot down. And then I got it down, far below that when modern technology came to bear. So I think that the reason I didn't make more errors is that I listened to people, especially my wife. When I got fired, I said to my wife, I'm going to go out and look for an office. And she said, why are you going to do that? Nobody's going to come to you. You're going to go to them. I said, well, but I have to have it. She said, I'll tell you what. If people want to come to you, get an office, but don't do it until then. So, 40 years later, I still don't have an office. I'm sitting in my den here. And it's an interesting calculation because my kids' private school from kindergarten through undergraduate, all private school, the two of them in total cost $450,000. Today, it'd probably be twice that. And over 20 years, that's what an office would have cost me. I calculated rent and maintenance and a secretary. But, so I listened to my wife. I mean, she had great instincts about these things. And I also watched, I worked for a firm in Princeton early on when not long after I was out of college, after I left Prudential. And I watched, closest to a genius I've ever stood was this guy, Ben Trigo. And, I watched how he handled his business. And while he made a lot of mistakes because he had a lot of problems about some things, I watched how he and his partner built a business. And one of the most interesting things that ever happened, he dragged me along to these meetings in Manhattan. I was about 26 or something. And he'd pitched his strategy program. Now, at the time, his strategy program was $15,000. Today, that would equate to about 50 or 60. And he smoked a cigar. Back then, you could smoke in buildings. And I said to him in the elevator once, Ben, I don't think the cigar is appropriate. Well, you're talking to these people. He said, I need the cigar. I said, why on earth would you need the cigar? He says, because after I tell them the fee is $15,000, if I don't put the cigar in my mouth, I begin to giggle. So even he had imposter.
That's funny. How this has always been an issue for me, something I've worked on, something I've tried to improve, something I've taught people, that how to be effective in terms of getting stuff done, producing results. And, you're way up there in producing results in terms of not only just getting clients, but you've written, 50 some books? Are you up to 60 yet?
Yeah, no, I'm around 67.
67 books.
Well, you mentioned $1 Million Consulting. It's in its 8th edition, value-based fees, 3rd edition, and so forth.
Yeah.
And Audible and foreign rights, and they're in 15 languages. But, I can write. The publisher wants a book in 6 months. I promise them in 4. I write it in 2. I calculated that in a 40-hour week, 9 to 5 every day, I could write a 200-page book if somebody paid me like $300,000. It would be difficult, but I could do it.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How are you so productive?
Well,
what is your secret of production? And can you help us be more productive?
I think I can. There are 2 issues here that you're raising. The first is this. When I write, when I speak, and we build on strengths, not weaknesses. We don't grow by correcting weakness. We grow by building on strengths. So when I was fired, I said, what can I do well? I can't network. I hate networking. I hate small talk. I mean, some babies are ugly, right? But I could write and speak. So yes. I wrote this book. And today, what am I doing? I'm still writing and speaking.
Yeah.
So you build on your strengths, and you have to understand that you can't self-edit. If I write something, I was writing something this morning. If I'm putting, there are 4 ways to approach innovation. I'm not going to stop and say, maybe there are 2, or should there be 6? If I said 4, I said 4. I'm going to justify it. I use social proof to justify. Assigning, research to what I do is grandiloquent. But saying that I investigate is true because I use social research to prove things that we can see every day. So people buy in. So I don't self-edit. I'm fearless. I still have the brand, contrarian. And so I try to turn things on its head. I just trademarked the phrase no normal because there's no return to normal and there's no new normal. People ought to stop this. Every day is going to change. I mean, hell, Amazon just started selling telehealth, medical services. So come on. The second thing is...
Are you going to write a book, No Normal? Not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea at all. I might. Yeah. So the other thing is to stay accountable. You can't use electronic means because you can't see anything. See, I use a file of facts. So this is this week at a glance.
Yep.
So I can see my whole week.
Yep.
And so, you see there are about 2-inch entries here so that if I say I can't fit you in, I mean it. But here is my year at a glance.
Yeah.
So I can see juxtaposition. So I'm not going to schedule something back to back where I won't be highly productive, where I don't have a rest, where I don't need to, recharge my batteries. And on a day like this, I've got your interview. I had a planned annual physical with a doctor, those 2 things. And I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've had 5 coaching calls and I have 3 more. And the reason it's so crowded...
You've had 5 coaching calls already today?
Yeah, so far. It's It's 1:16 here. But the
Yeah.
reason is I was in Vegas last week, so I had a crowd thing to this week. So
Yeah.
I make a little piece of yellow paper, very simple,
Yeah.
cross off after I'm done, and I keep track of everything. Here's tomorrow's. That's Wednesday. So some days I'll only have 2 or 3 things, and I'll be involved in, I have 100 hobbies I'm involved in. I typically work about 20 hours a week, if you call it work. That is, I'm engaged in marketing 20 hours a week. But I am ruthless about my time, absolutely ruthless. If somebody says, can I have a half an hour? No, what do you need? Ask me a question. You probably need 2 minutes.
So you do coaching calls with clients.
Oh, yeah.
And how long are those calls typically?
Depends what program they're in. In most of my programs, it's 30 minutes with a hard ending. But some of my programs, they can have as long as they want because they're paying me a lot of money. And it's unlimited emails and unlimited access. Yeah. And so I call it concierge consulting. And so when they need, if they want me to review a proposal, if there's something that came up and it's important for tomorrow, we take care of it. But normally I limit things to 30 minutes because after that, conversations get circular.
Yeah.
And I don't do small talk.
Alan, tell me about some of your hobbies or pursuits outside of your business.
Well, for example, about 5 minutes from where we sit, I own a second house. And the reason we own that house is we rent it out, except it's got a separate carriage house. It's got a 3-car garage. So I keep one garage and I keep the carriage house because I have a giant layout of Lionel trains in there. Everything I could never afford as a kid. It's a 40 by 40 layout. It's been featured in 3 or 4 magazines.
Yes.
And the most fun I have had with it is the scenery. I mean, running the trains is okay, but it gets boring. But the scenery, people go over, I have an oil depot, I have boats, I have a bridge that goes up and down, I have a hobo thing.
Do you buy this stuff or you build some of it?
I buy it all and I place it and I paint it and so forth.
Yeah.
So I have $1 million of cars in my garage. I have exotic cars. We just came back from Vermont where I did falconry. The thing with the bird on your arm.
Yeah.
And we took the rolls up there. When you put that car on the open road, man, and in northern Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, those are clean, even roads. You just let her rip. The one design flaw in these exotic cars is that the passenger can see the speedometer. So my wife is always giving me heat. But, they should be covered, really. I play with the dogs. I've got these 2 dogs, and I'm still trying to teach Royce here to fetch. My last shepherd fetched like a champion. He didn't want to fetch at all. I smoke very fine cigars. I drink good wine. My wife and I eat out every evening. With rare exception, we eat out every evening. And I
understand your wife. You told me a long time ago your wife doesn't cook.
No, my wife's a home economist by training. She could cook for the 4th Armored Division, but she doesn't cook. So we go out every night and talk about the day.
We're just the opposite, but anyway, yeah.
We travel together. Yeah. We love the theater. We have, streaming is great for us. We have our favorite TV shows. Right now we're watching the newest season of The Diplomat, which is superb.
Oh, that just came out?
Yeah, the new season just came out. The second episode we just watched. And my wife, believe it or not, since they put the yellow line on the football field superimposed on the camera where you can see the first down, my wife has become an ardent football fan. She's a big Kansas City Chiefs fan, yeah. And last night when the Chiefs won in overtime, I was already in bed, and she stayed. I said, whoever thought you would stay up to watch a game while the dogs and I went to sleep? So now we share that as well. I tell you this because I like you. I've known you a long time, so I don't tell everybody this. But I've collected stamps since I was 10 years old. And up here on my shelves, I have a very advanced U.S. stamp collection. It gives me great pleasure. I have here around my den rocks. This one says Nantucket. And I get rocks from all over the world. And I bring them here and I put, where I was on them. And sometimes, Robert, I sit here and I say to, 100 rocks, none of you would know each other without me.
That's fun.
This rock is special.
What is
this rock is from the Mendenhall Glacier in Hawaii. And my wife and I, we had a cruise up there. We got on a chopper, a little bubble chopper, with a 24-year-old pilot who had been flying these things for 7 years. And in the rain and mist, he landed on 2 glaciers. And on the Mendenhall Glacier, I got that rock. This is a place where you can take this water, rivulets running down the glacier, take this cold water in and drink it.
Yeah.
And some of it is blue and green because of the minerals, and it goes down and plankton or something feed on it. I mean, it's an ecosystem that's incredible. Anyway, these are the kinds of things we do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Much more exciting life than mine, let me tell you. My only hobby is collecting jazz, and I have 7,000 jazz albums.
Wow.
And I listen to it a lot. Every year I buy 100 new jazz albums, you know.
Well, who's your favorite guy? Your favorite woman?
Well, Miles Davis is the number one. I have everything he's ever done. You know, John Coltrane. But I kind of specialize in what's coming out now. You know, everyone says, what are the best 10 jazz albums in the world? Well, they're all before 1960, but, you know, there's been a zillion incredible albums since then. And, you know, I just curated my latest list of 150 albums from the last 50 years. My very, very favorite. I mean, there's some great music. Anyway, I won't get into that.
A fabulous hobby, though. That's fantastic. I mean,
it is.
I love doo-wop, you know.
Doo-wop?
Doo-wop, yeah.
I like all rock and roll from the 70s when I grew up as well. I listened to that. All the albums I had when I was a teenager, I now have digitally, you know. It's all on my laptop. 1.5 terabytes of music. Anyway. But, you know, really getting into something like that is great. So, what was the other question I had about that? Oh, something else. We all, to some degree, are influenced, inspired by, mentored by, influenced by other people. And, you know, I've definitely been influenced by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. You included philosophers, teachers, all this kind of thing. Who have you been most influenced by? Because I know you're a big reader. You're a bigger reader than I am. You've read a lot of things. And I'm just interested to know who are the figures in history that you've paid a lot of attention to, read, been influenced by, shaped by?
Well, I don't have, it's hard for you to point out single people, but I'll give you some examples. I love great writing. I learn more from fiction than I do from nonfiction. And so in college, in a creative writing course, the professor says, pick any author, but read his entire oeuvre. So I picked John Steinbeck, not Steinbeck, I picked Updike, John Updike, who comes from up here in New England and who was still very much active when I was in college in the 60s. And so I read everything before, during, and then up to his death. And it was fascinating reading someone's entire collective work. But, you know, I think that, you know, probably Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand and The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck, you know, these are great American novels. Then you add in things like Cervantes and La Mancha and Moby Dick and so forth, A Tale of Two Cities. I learned a great deal from fiction. I also am an ardent student of the Civil War because I think the Civil War changed the world, not just the U.S. And the politics and the leadership and the military in the Civil War. I think the United States, right now, in my opinion, as we are talking, has two very mediocre presidential nominees here. But I think overall, through 40-some of these people, we've only had maybe 4 great presidents, if you look at really great. And I think the greatest was Abraham Lincoln, who got this country through a time that could have easily divided it. Yeah, really. And, you know, Lincoln lost several elections before he ever got to be president.
Yeah.
And he writes the Gettysburg Address on the back of an envelope. And the other guy who spoke that day spoke for 2 hours, and nobody remembers him.
Right.
That was a great lesson for me. And I always think that the founding fathers, for whatever flaws they had, we're all human, were geniuses. They created a system that was genius that can be run by idiots. And the reason that we are so violent...
That's a funny way to say it.
Well, it's the only way I can look at it.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah. Because the thing about running for office requires behaviors that are not the same predispositions required for governing. And so we don't get great presidents. We don't get great governors, as a rule. We get some. So I try to learn from these things, you know? And my feeling is that there are people I've learned from who have been almost evanescent in my life. I mean, I've known them for 20 minutes or for half a day, but I learned a great deal. You know, when I did something for Bristol Myers early in my career, I had handouts, and I spelled Bristol Myers' name wrong.
Really?
And the executives in the room began to scoff and wonder what the hell. The senior vice president said, "Shut up. You've all made mistakes. Cross out the extra letter and listen to this guy." And he taught me generosity. That I never forgot that lesson. He taught me generosity. He could have thrown me out. I would have given his money back. Taught me generosity. And I never met him again. I can't remember his name, but those are the things that improved me as a person.
Yeah. There have been people in business like you, other people on the internet. And, when the internet came out, I attended many, many seminars. I aspired to be, make $1 zillion online. And I did okay online, not a zillion. I did okay. I only really wrote one book, but it paid for my house, which ain't bad. I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time with the right list and, whatever. And that led to everything else. But, I found it was like, oh, yes, that person, Alan Weiss. I want to be like Alan Weiss or emulate these people. And at a certain point, I went, I can be inspired by these people, but I just have to do the best I can with what I've got.
Hmm.
What was your relationship to mentors or business leaders or people? Did you want to be like them, or that wasn't a thing for you?
I just wanted to adopt the behaviors that I thought worked well for them and that I was capable of perpetuating. I never wanted to be like anybody. One of my books is $1 Million Maverick. I just wanted to be me. But I did recognize I could continue to improve by seeing what other people did that was good and seeing if it fit me. There's a great story, it could be apocryphal, about Picasso, and supposedly Picasso said his mother told him he was a genius. And if he entered the army, he'd be a great general. If he entered the priesthood, he'd become pope. He said, but I became an artist and I became Picasso.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, well, I definitely became Robert Middleton, whoever that is, and I'm happy with that. Something I've said is there's two big things in life: happiness and success, and obviously one supports the other. And if you're unhappy, maybe you won't be as successful, etc. What's your thoughts about success and happiness and the interrelatedness of those two things?
Well, if you're not happy, you're not successful, period. Because just because you make a lot of money doesn't mean you're successful.
Yeah.
Life's about being happy. Like I said, you create happiness, you consume happiness. That's fair enough. I'll tell you the way I look at this. If you look at what you enjoy greatly and what's really important to others,
yeah.
If you really enjoy something that's important to others, that's your calling, and you're going to be very successful, very healthy, self-reinforcing. If you love doing something, but it's not very important, that's an addiction. Now, that could be drugs or alcohol, or it could be...
We're collecting rocks.
it could be Angry Birds, which I play on my iPad.
What is that?
I play Angry Birds on my iPad. I'm addicted to Angry Birds.
Oh, do you? Really?
Yeah, I'm at level 14.
You have time for Angry Birds?
I don't work that much.
That's funny. I got... somewhere along the way I went, computer games is not for me. So I don't play any computer games. I just don't get the concept. Well, then again, I watch too much news every day. So, what's worse?
I don't watch the news because it's totally biased. But,
yeah.
This particular game is a strategy game, Angry Birds. So I enjoy it. Now, let me just finish here. If something is very important, but you don't enjoy it, that's a grind. That's a 9-to-5 job.
Right.
And if something is neither important nor you enjoy it, you're alienated.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at this happiness that you raise. And I think you have to be happy in connection with contributing to the world and supporting yourself and your loved ones.
Yeah. I've sort of come to, in my maturity, if you can say that, is that it makes sense to be happy for no reason. I mean, just now I'm happy. And in that, whatever the next thing is, you're going to have fun doing it, whatever it is. I make dog food for my dogs. We cook it. I enjoy doing that. I have a process. I do it. I cook it. I put on rock music as I'm doing it. I mean, it's just whatever. Whatever you do, you can be happy.
Well, I agree with you. The trouble is, you said it's okay to be happy for no reason. Too many people are unhappy for no reason. That's the problem. They're
Yeah.
just permanently unhappy. You walk into a coffee shop at 7 a.m, and the woman with the coffee is already, ornery. Come on, what's the rest of the day going to be like?
Yeah. What's that about? What do you think? I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I agree. Some people are, anyway, they're unhappy. They're angry.
Well, they're not responsible. They're not accountable. See, what do they say? Oh, it's a toxic workplace. The workplace is horrible. Well, then get out of it. Or stop complaining.
Yeah.
My coworkers are terrible. Then leave. Let's stop complaining. I mean, when you and I were back in school, there weren't 14 committees and 15 people and 9 ombudsmen to whom to complain. You played the hand you were dealt.
Yeah.
And people today don't play the hand they were dealt. They want to keep changing hands. You can't do that.
Yeah. What I have things that I get into and think about, and then I write about. Do you use ChatGPT at all?
Rarely. Every word I write is mine. I'll sometimes use it for an investigation, but never to write anything.
Right. It's the fun. It's better than Angry Birds, in my opinion.
Well, okay.
I wake up in the morning sometime from a dream, and I'm thinking an idea, and I say, "Tell me more about this." And all of a sudden, I've got a new thing. Get 2 wise people, find a topic, and tell them to have a conversation with each other. I mean, whatever. Fun stuff. So what are you obsessed about right now, if anything? In a good sense, really into, thinking about a lot.
Well, I think that we really need to change education. Right now, we're raising generations of non-educated kids, and we all ought to be arrested for child abuse. For example, schools are funded by and large by local property tax. So if you live in an affluent community, you have a lot of money to play with. If you live in a poor community, you don't have much money to play with, but they need it the most. So the funding has to be changed. We have to stop teachers' unions because they're ruining the schools. And they're doing so by introducing all kinds of things that are beneficial for teachers, but not beneficial for the customer, which is the student and the parent. We warehouse kids. We put them through first grade, second grade, third grade, regardless of how well they can advance, regardless of how well they learn. And so we're doing this by something, a principle that's about 250 years old. And so we're not producing intelligent, well-educated kids, and that is undermining their ability to succeed in the future. It's cutting into their potential. And every day, on the newscasts, you can see newsreaders, because they're not journalists anymore, you can see newsreaders saying between you and I, which is an abomination. They say, well, language changes. No, what happens is you don't have much of an education. So, I'm very much in favor of and contributing to the improvement in the educational system. I also think that we have to give people much more of a feeling of an equal level playing field and an equal starting point. And that's not done through exception. It's not done through special privilege. It's done by really helping everybody get the same education, everybody getting the same opportunity, and then letting people proceed on the basis of merit. But we have to understand that the finish line can't be equal because people have different talents. People have different abilities.
Yeah.
So, and we also, I'd say finally, we have to stop directing everybody toward college. It's an arbitrary kind of learning process where a lot of people go simply to get a ticket stamped and to make contacts. Airlines right now are hiring pilots without the requirement of a college degree, which I think makes sense because what you want is somebody who can land a plane, not discuss Schopenhauer. So why not?
Yeah. Well, I'm on the same page with this. I'm really concerned about education. But when I look back to my schooling, my dad was in the Air Force. We moved around to bases. We had various places that we went to school in Europe and in Canada. I'm from Canada. And in high school, I got to a place where I hated school. Hated. I couldn't wait till I got out. It was not fun for me. I didn't go to college. It was I couldn't imagine going to college after school. So So schools have always sucked, in my opinion, in many, many ways. I mean, some ways good, but many ways bad. But that being aside, it seems this whole thing of every kid is on a cell phone every 2 minutes. I wonder how that's. There's so many things that have changed, and I don't think the educational system has caught up with it. Although we're hearing about schools banning cell phones during the school day, which is brilliant.
Right, but I don't think that's really the issue. I think the issue are
Yeah.
teachers who mesmerize kids. I mean, if what I'm hearing in a classroom is really fascinating me, I'm not going to get on my cell phone. And again, we're shifting accountability here.
Yeah.
I've had groups. I've had 20 people. I've had 2,000 people. And I can captivate these groups. I'll get every eye on me because I know how to use humor. I know how to challenge them. I know how to say controversial things that they'll think about. And that's what a teacher has to do. I can remember the name of every one of my grammar school teachers. And
Really?
And unlike you, I went to college. I have 3 advanced degrees. But I can remember that because in grammar school, I learned to read and write. I learned history. I learned geography. And when I got to high school, I had to step up on people. And when I got to college, I had to step up. But it started with that foundation,
Yeah.
So the ability to use language. I mean, what do they want to do now? Do away with cursive writing, right? The ability to use language is fundamental. And that's why I believe, if you want to say to me, press 2 in order to hear Spanish, okay, we have a large Spanish population. But if you're coming here from another country, you should have a duality of language. You should be able to speak English as well as your native language because you need it to succeed here.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can be done, and what are you doing? You say you're working on this in some ways.
Well, not too long ago, I've been out for 2 years. I was asked to come in and run the ballet here, the Ballet Rhode Island. They were in terrible shape. This was just before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit. They owed bills. They had problems. And so they asked me to come in from the outside. They said, if we offer you the presidency, will you take it? I said, yes, but I will run this as a business, which is what I tell other people. If you accept that, it's going to be an iron rule. And so 3 years later, we had $1 million in the bank. All our debts were erased. Is that noise too much there?
No.
Okay.
What is it?
It's I'm sorry, Robert. It's my window's open. It was a gardener. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Their debts were erased, and we had a sterling reputation in the arts. And so we went into the public schools. We called it Providence, take off on Providence, and for free, we taught school students how to dance. We started an adaptive program where kids, for example, with autism, people on the spectrum, danced. We involved companies to help sponsor this. And so that was our foray from the ballet into the educational field in Providence. And it really made a big difference. And I think organizations have to consider what they're going to do for free for public education so that kids can get these experiences. And, I have to tell you, one of my most frustrating feelings about education is that the teachers union is so entrenched that it's hard to make any constructive changes.
Interesting. So why dance? I mean, I love that idea. I love to dance. Never learned how to really do it formally, but I love to move that way. But I can see that that's, outside the head in a whole different way. Why did you feel that was important?
Well, because your emotions are expressed through dance.
Yep.
You can learn through movement.
Yep.
It's both an ancient and modern art form. And we didn't just do classical ballets; we did modern dance as well.
Right.
It's an art form where you can create tremendous diversity and embrace diversity in both the audience and the board and the dancers. And so you do what you can with what you've got. I mean, I've been asked to run for public office any number of times, and I'm not doing that. Like I said, there are ugly babies, so I'm not interested. But my wife and I have served probably on 10 boards between us. Wow. I was chair also of the Newport International Film Festival, and I was on 2 theater boards, and she's been on all kinds of nonprofits. She's raised millions for philanthropy.
Really?
I wanted to write a book with my wife, How I Raised Millions Without Asking for a Dime, but she refuses to get involved with this. In any case, so that's what we've tried to do within the community, the greater community here. And, and we can, it's easy to write a check. We can do that. But we also participate. And, my son, who was in acting for a while, said it's amazing. You and mom just don't go to Broadway. You do this at the amateur level, the collegiate level, the high school level. And I think that's what kids need. So, sports are fine. I'm that's great. But so is dance, and so is orchestra and things like that. And I think what you said before is important if you extrapolate it. It's not just the cell phones. It's the video games. It's communicating remotely. It's getting involved with these things on the internet. Kids don't interact the way they used to,
Right.
And they're missing something because of that.
Right. So what's next for you, Alan Weiss?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't worry about it. I'm 78. I'm in very good health. I just had the doctor's thing I did this morning is my annual dermatological checkup. I'm a hypochondriac, which helps. Guys, what about this? What about this? What about this?
Are you really?
He says to me, shut up. I just had my annual physical as well. So I'm in very good health, thank God. And I'm going to continue coaching and writing. I might cut down on the live work I do. I'll continue traveling for pleasure, especially depending on where my wife wants to go. But I've never been big on planning where I'm going to be next year. And that's never hurt me because you remain light on your feet that way. You're not entrenched somewhere. And, I want to be light on my feet. And I have frankly, I have the great, great good fortune to be coaching people all over the world. And so I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on because I have my own laboratory.
You've traveled a lot. Tell me about some of the places that have had the biggest impact on you. And one I just remember is when you talked about visiting Normandy. And that was very moving to me. And the whole Normandy, 50, what it was, I don't know how many years it was. The anniversary was just recently.
Oh, yeah. 45, I guess, 44, 45.
Yeah.
It must be 44. Well, look, I said my father was in the paratroops. My wife and I went to Normandy, and we walked the beaches, and we saw they still have the German gun emplacement, things like this. But we walked up the hill that the soldiers had to climb in the face of enemy fire, probably 40 pounds on their back, in horrible conditions, crossfire, enfilade, what do you call it, flanking fire. And it was tough climbing the hill with nothing. So it's unbelievable. And then you go to the cemetery, which is American soil, and you see these rows of graves. And it's just heartbreaking. And It's heartbreaking because Lincoln talked about, people who made their last full measure of devotion at Gettysburg, at the cemetery. Yeah. And these were kids, really. With except for the officers, these were young men primarily who gave their last full measure of devotion to keep the world free from tyrannical forces. And not enough people appreciate that today. Not enough people appreciate the soldiers and military men and women today, who are of service to our country. So that was very moving. And then, I stood on the Great Wall of China, where you feel like an ant. And it's interesting there that it was built 2,000 years ago or something. And the Chinese can't repair parts of it today because they can't figure out how to do it. They can't get the equipment there. They don't know how to fix it because they want to, keep it intact. They can't do it. We were on the Acropolis in Athens, and they're repairing they don't replace anything, but they keep it steady.
Yeah.
And the machinery they're using is the same type of machinery they used to build the Acropolis, except now it's powered by steam or whatever. And it was human powered before. Before the takeover, I was in Hong Kong several times. I was there once after. And Hong Kong was this wonderful mix of Eastern mysticism and Western capitalism. We were in Bora Bora on stilts over the Pacific. And I snorkeled in a cauldron, which is the crater of an undersea volcano.
Wow.
I can go on and on. We went on safari in South Africa, which was beyond my wildest expectations. Took the family to the Grand Canyon. We said, we ought to go there. We've never been there. And not only is it drop dead gorgeous, it's hard to describe, but I shouldn't laugh. The ranger says to us, the largest causes of death in the Grand Canyon are people texting on their phones where they're going. Yeah, you shouldn't laugh, right? But you do. And selfies. The second is selfies.
As you're texting, you trip. Right. Oh, boy.
And there they go.
I'm working at a Guinness World Record of being the person who's never had a cell phone for the longest time. I've never owned one.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That is pretty good.
Well, I don't travel and go out and about as much. And, when I'm out there, I don't want people calling me or text. I just don't want it, but.
Oh, God.
And they're addictive.
Well, sure they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
At one point, I had 3 Ferraris in a row. I had them each for 2 years. And then I stopped because they took out.
You had a Ferrari addiction.
Yeah, I did. So I leased them for 2 years. But then they stopped making stick shifts, And so it's not a sports car anymore. It's, you just put your foot down. I have a Corvette in here with a stick shift. But somebody said, why didn't you get a 4th Ferrari? So I said, I think I outgrew them. And he said, after 3 seconds, I don't think I'll ever again hear an adult male say that. He outgrew the Ferrari. You fill cell phones. You don't need them. Good for you.
It's pretty funny. I totaled 2 cars in a period of a 4-month period. And one time I wasn't in it. It rolled down a hill and hit a tree. The other time anyway, that was, and then the other time I hit a utility pole. And then we got an electric car. And it's the only car we've had. Best car I've ever owned. It's fantastic, but.
It sounds like you have vendetta against wood. You hit a tree and a pole.
I don't think so. But I'm a little more careful driving now. I mean, I'd never had an accident, nothing. And now my insurance rates are ridiculous because of that, So, I don't usually talk about this with people, but you have a perspective. What is the biggest problem facing, let's make it big, because you're a big thinker, of the world right now?
Well, I think the biggest problem, I think there are 2 in all candor. I think one is the polarization in the United States. And whoever wins today or tomorrow, I hope, honest to God, we'll do something about that, because I think that's a world problem, because the United States is the most powerful country in the world, period. Has been and will be, always, probably. And so this polarization is not allowing us to get any healthy legislation accomplished. It's not allowing us to do things expeditiously and economically and so on. And we're losing a lot of talent. I mean, if you look back to the Tip O'Neills and the politicians like that, they brought both sides together. Both Ronald Reagan, the Republican, and Bill Clinton, the Democrat, were able to bring both sides together. So the polarization has to end. The problem in the world at large right now is that there is true evil. And terrorists are truly evil. Don't justify this by any means to me. Terrorists are evil.
Yeah, I agree.
The idiot in North Korea is evil. Putin is evil. Z is evil. The Iranian mullahs are evil. These are people who just want to kill people who don't agree with them. And whether it's for politics' sake or it's anti-Semitism or whatever it happens to be, it's horrible. So there's too much evil in the world, the difference being that the evil now has modern weapons.
Yeah, and you think of that and it's, you and I as an American citizen, you have more influence than I do in terms of the people you connect with. But even then, there's not a hell of a lot we can do about those people directly, except try to contain them in some way. Hence NATO, hence all of these kind of things. But we have some weird things going on, like Elon Musk is controlling his Starlink network,
right,
and he seems to be favoring Russia over Ukraine. I mean, things like that are, I don't know if Elon Musk is evil. He's a little wacky, obviously. Brilliant and wacky.
Well, my feeling about Musk is that I said for a long time, he can send a rocket. He wants to send a rocket to Mars, but he can't send a Tesla to California, So I just watched this booster be recaptured, which is pretty advanced technology, So the
Yeah,
booster
yeah,
right
yeah.
there. So I think that he should reuse these boosters to send these horribly ugly pickups he's manufactured out into space somewhere.
Some people love them, but they are kind of weird, aren't they?
Oh my God! I've been up close to them several times, and they are truly hideous.
But the division in America is the thing that concerns me the most. I have a friend who I discovered was a Republican and diehard Trumpist. And we got into an argument. He got very angry. And I said, I don't want to lose my friendship. We just won't talk about politics anymore. And it seems that we're so addicted to our side, either side. And we're both polarized because, I watch MSNBC, Republicans watch Fox, and never the twain shall meet, and we don't know what's happening on either side. We think so it seems, how does this heal? I mean, I think Kamala Harris is talking a good game about coming together. Whether she can accomplish it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she's just talking to get elected right now, and we'll see what happens. But look, if people have the attitude that it's not just that the other side is wrong, but that they're morally inferior, you'll always have polarization. Right. And so classical rhetoric used to be based on trying to win on rational and logical grounds. But today, it's not good enough for me to be right. You also have to be wrong. And so we feel this superiority ethically and morally, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to feel you're superior. You might have a different view on something. You might feel that you're perfectly correct. I can respect that. However, don't tell me that intellectually or morally I'm not equal to you. Once you say that, I don't want to talk to you.
Exactly. So how do you navigate that minefield? I mean, I don't know. What's Rhode Island? Rhode Island is mostly Democratic, right?
It's the most Catholic state. It's the most Democratic state. We've had a couple of Republican governors. We have 2 senators, 2 congressmen. I mean, you could probably shoot somebody in the street, and if you're a Democrat, you'll still be elected.
Well, yeah, we have Trump, who's all the stuff he's done, and it's amazing that the race is so close. Given that, it's just it's insane.
Look, I like to think of myself as an intellectual and as somebody with critical thinking skills. And the trouble with the Democratic position, I'm not taking sides here, but just rationally, you cannot say that Trump is purely evil and he's toxic and he's the worst thing that's ever been, and then in the next breath tell me the race is tight. Because if he's that bad and if he's that awful and everybody should see it because, I'm morally superior, how the hell is the race that equal? I don't think half of Americans are stupid. I don't think half of Americans are sleazy. I think that they have different opinions. And unless you can resolve those differences in opinions, you're always going to have this toxic kind of polarization. So, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day today or early into tomorrow morning. Whatever it is, I'll accept it. I'm an American. I'll accept it. I will support the president. And I'm not going to go around claiming that the election was a fraud or somebody was cheated or anything else. I'm going to accept the results. And if somebody else doesn't want to accept the results, that's fine, but don't bother me. I'm not interested in hearing your story.
Yeah. Well, Alan Weiss, I think with that, we're done. Here we are on election day, and we'll know, in the next month or so who won.
Right. Hanging chads, wasn't that it? Hanging chads.
Yeah, and let us hope there is not any violence, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Well, I hope safety for everyone. I hope everybody can support whomever wins, both in the national elections, the gubernatorial elections, local elections. Support the winner. Be fair and honest. If too many people did not agree with you, maybe next time. But thank you for having me, Robert. I really appreciate it. It's always good to see you again.
Thank you, Alan, and Godspeed.
And Godspeed to you, my son.